Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm so glad you're here. Let us create a fun, sparkling, starry background winter card. This is a very simple card. You can easily mass produce it in a bunch of different bright holiday colors. Well, before we get started, I would really appreciate if you could take a minute to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so that you get notified each time I post a new video. Let's take a look at the stamp set that I'll be using today. I have the 6x6 Christmas Sparkling stamp by Simon's Stamp. This was part of the Holiday Sparkle release which went live last month. I will leave a link down in the description box below where you can find products from this release. For my sentiment, I will be using the Sending Happy Thoughts Your Way sentiment from the Warmest Wishes stamp set by Simon's Stamp. This, I guess, was part of one of my card kits by Simon. Well, let's get started. I have this bright blue cardstock that I have cut to 4 by 5 and quarter inches, which is slightly smaller than an A2 size card base. Now, since the cling stamp does not have very defined edges, I like to place my cardstock away from the edge of my stamping tool. I like to secure the cardstock in place with some really light tape runner. The adhesive on this tape is not very sticky and I can be rest assured that it won't tear my cardstock. I close the door of my stamping tool, which will now securely hold the stamp in place. I decided to heat emboss some of the beautiful gold embossing powder on this panel. So first I will prep my card front using my anti-static powder tool by Cat Scrappiness. Then I use some clear embossing and watermark ink by Simon's Stamp. You could also use Versamark ink instead. I used the ultra fine gold heat embossing powder by Simon's Stamp, which I poured over the entire card front. Now we can go ahead and heat fix this powder. Well, since I'm applying heat on the entire panel and not just a small portion of the panel, I am sure that this panel is going to warp. To minimize the warping of my panel, what I like to do is let the gun run for a minimum of 30 seconds and let it become really hot before I bring it over my cardstock. Once the powder starts melting, I like to keep moving my heat gun all over the panel. You could also apply some heat on the back of the panel. Well, even after this, my panel did warp a little. So while I go ahead and work on my sentiment, I kept this panel under a pile of books to flatten it out. For my sentiment, I have the Sending Happy Thoughts Your Way sentiment from the Warmest Wishes stamp set. I stamped it onto a white piece of cardstock and then heat embossed it using the same gold embossing powder. Well, this set does have some really beautiful sentiments which you can use for your Christmas cards or other holiday and winter cards. I wanted to add some grounding on this white sentiment circle which would go on the bright and busy blue gold background. So for that, I used a larger circle from the nested circle dies and cut out some of the gold cardstock and adhered it behind my sentiment circle. I used some liquid glue for that. Now we can mount this on our card front. You could turn this into a top folding or a side folding card. I wanted to keep it as simple as I could, so well, this sentiment circle would be the focal point of my card. I will not be adding any other embellishments or sequences to this card. Well, I did decide to add some little extra shine and brightness on this card. So I'm using the Galaxy Simon's Stamp Positively Saturated ink and I'm ink blending it all around the edges of my cardstock. The gold embossing powder will resist all that ink. All you need to do is once you're done ink blending, just wipe it out or buff it out using some paper towel or a cloth. Now all we have to do is stick our sentiment circle on this beautiful embossed card front. Now for my card base, I'm using the exact same blue color card. I have a top folding card here. I cut the card panel to be 11.5 by 4 1/4 inches and score it at 5.5 inches. So here we have a top folding card. For my sentiment circle, I used small foam squares to adhere it. I wanted to add some pop on this card. Here's a look at our finished card. I did add some snowflakes around the sentiment. Well, I love how this card turned out and I can't wait to batch produce these. Well, I didn't mass produce them today, but I will definitely upload a short video where I will show you all the fun colors of cardstock that I used to mass produce this design. I hope you had fun watching today's video and got inspired. I will leave a link down in the description box below for all the supplies that I used in today's video. I would love for you to become a subscriber to my channel, and if you do subscribe or are already a subscriber, please make sure to hit the bell icon so that you don't miss the next time I post. Hit the like button and let me know in the comments down below if you have any ideas or suggestions. Also, if you'd like to share your creations, please tag me on my Instagram at rp_shutterbug. There's a link to that in the description box below. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Well, Christmas is just round the corner, so we will be creating a beautiful, snowy winter wonderland Christmas card. I will be using a gingerbread house for my focal point today. Well, before we take a look at how I created this card, I would really appreciate if you could take a minute to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so that you get notified each time I post a new video. Well, here's a look at the die set that I will be using for our card today. This is the house die from Sizzix. It has 11 total dies, which will create a beautiful gingerbread house. We also have tiny little dies to create a snowman and some Christmas trees. Well, for our card today, I will be using only the house and all the components that we will be using to construct this gingerbread house. I like to store all of those little die cuts and the dies itself in this little container, which is easy to store away all those small little pieces, and I don't need to be scared of losing them anywhere. Well, to begin with, I have a white cardstock. This is an A2 size cardstock, and I will be using this to cut out all of my pieces. You could also use colored cardstock to cut out your pieces, but I find it more easy or less time consuming when I cut all of these tiny little dies using a white cardstock and coloring it depending on what I want to create or what the focal point will look like. Now, for the main frame of the house and the roof, I have used this cream color and light brown color cardstock. Well, like I mentioned before, you could also cut these out using white cardstock and color it using alcohol markers, watercolors, or any colors of your choice. Well, let's work on this component of the roof. This looks like maybe since it's a winter wonderland house that I'm trying to create, I will be adding some snow detailing to this roof. There are so many ways you can add a snowy effect to your project. You could use gels, pastes, glitter, or use even glitter cardstock. Well, this is one of my favorite and easiest techniques to apply glue. I like to hold this tiny, delicate roof piece with the reverse tweezers by Cat Scrappiness, and using my fine tip barely art glue, I apply glue at random places on this roof piece. Once I'm satisfied with that, what I do is just go ahead and pour a generous amount of this glitz glitter powder all over the glue. Be it any other time of the year, I wouldn't have gone with this glitter powder. Well, it does really get a lot messy. But since it's Christmas, wintry, magical, I really love how this glitter powder turns out on the roof of my gingerbread house. All I do is have a rough printer paper to hold all of that glitter, which I can then pour out into the container. I will let all that glitter and snow dry while we work on these tiny little elements of our gingerbread house. First, we will fix the string lights for our house. I have cut out tiny little bulbs using yellow, purple, and blue color cardstock. I like to store all these tiny little pieces in this triangle tray by Cat Scrappiness, and for these pieces it's difficult to pick them up, so it's better to use a jewel picker or a sequin picker. It makes your job a lot more easier. Next, I went ahead and using my alcohol markers, I colored all of these tiny little elements. These are windows, curtains, and the rooms and doors for our gingerbread house. I didn't do any kind of fancy coloring here. It was just simple coloring, one layered coloring with each color. Now we can fix all of these pieces, and I'm using my Barely Art glue again to fix these tiny little pieces. Now this is a card design which you could easily mass produce. Well, you could keep it similar with the same kind of snowy background, the same gingerbread house, or you could add more features to it, including the little snowman and the Christmas trees, which were part of the die. While my snowy, glittery rooftop is drying, I thought let's just fix the doors and windows of the house. I will be keeping this dark brown roof structure over it just to make sure that I'm placing my doors and windows properly and well aligned to the rest of the house. This is a very easy design to recreate, and placing all of these little elements were really easy. We also have tiny little detailings in this die, which is why I love this die so much. Here is a small little layer of snow that went on my windows and on my little chimney. Next, I want to create a snow hill for my house. For that, I'm using this Crafter's Essential Winter Dies. This is by Cat Scrappiness. This has two snow hills, some Christmas trees, and a reindeer. I'll be using one of those snow hill dice and cut it out using the white cardstock. And here we have a snow bank which is perfect for our A2 size card and which will go behind the house. If you want to add more dimension to your card, you could also cut out a second snow hill. For my sentiment, I will be stamping the Merry Christmas sentiment from the Reindeer Game stamp set, again by Cat Scrappiness. I stamped it using my Versafine Onyx Black ink right on top of the snow hill. Now to add some more texture and layers and well character to my snow hill, I will do the same exact thing that I did for my rooftop. I'm using some glue and just very roughly lining up the edge of the snow hill. Make sure that I'm not being very precise, very neat. No, I'm roughly applying glue on the snow hill, and then again I will generously pour all of that glitter powder over the snow hill. I love how glittery and shiny this turned out. I will let it dry. Well, this will take approximately, say, 10 to 15 minutes for the snow and the glitter to completely dry. Meanwhile, let's finish up with our gingerbread house. Now, all we have to do is assemble the roof and place it on top of our house. I stuck all of the elements of the rooftop using liquid glue. You could also use spray adhesive here since these are really tiny, thin pieces of die cuts. Now, before we fix the roof onto the main frame of the house, I wanted to create something more colorful background. For that, I will be using my Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink in the shade Cadet and create a halo effect around the house. I'm using a blending brush and very light-handedly blending the blue around the house. I'm not covering up the entire background here. Now let's start assembling the card. First, we will begin with the snow hill. I'm using some double-sided tape to attach this snow hill onto the base of our card panel. You can also use some foam tape to pop it up and create a dimensional look. Now the panel that I'm using here is slightly smaller than an A2 size card base. This measures 4 by 5 and quarter, so I had to trim out the snow hill slightly from both the ends. Now let's fix our house. For the roof of the house, I will be using some foam tape to add some dimension to it. You will see that I'm using liquid glue here. This is so that I have some kind of wiggle room before I finally stick the roof onto the house. Now once I'm done with that, I will use my Spectrum Noir glitter brush pen to add some sparkle to the little snow ledges on the window and on the chimney. Now we can adhere the card front onto a pre-folded note card. Here I'm using a top folding note card and I adhere this panel using some double-sided tape. Now all we have to do is adhere the main focal point of our card on this card front. Well, for that, I'm using some double-sided tape and some liquid glue. Well, you could also go ahead and pop up the house using some foam tape, but since the roof of my house was already popped up, I decided to go with a flatter look. So I'm using some double-sided tape and some liquid glue for that wiggle room before I finally fix the house onto my card front. Using the lightest shade of gray alcohol marker that I had in my stash, I created this little shadowy effect below the house and some streaks of gray coming out of the chimney that will resemble the smoke coming out of the chimney. Well, to embellish my cart front, I have the white snowflake sprinkles by Cat Scrappiness. I randomly placed it all over my cart front just to create a snowy effect for the cart. I finished off this card by adding some glossy accents to those little light bulbs on our string lights. Well, I love how beautiful this card looks and it can be easily mass produced. I hope you had fun watching today's video and got inspired, and I will leave a link down in the description box below for all the supplies that I used in today's video. I would love for you to become a subscriber to my channel, and if you do subscribe or are already a subscriber, please make sure to hit the bell icon so that you don't miss the next time I post. Also, hit the like button and let me know in the comments down below if you have any ideas or suggestions. If you'd like to share your creations with me, please tag me on my Instagram at rp_shutterbug. There's a link to that in the description box below. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe. Hello everyone and welcome back to another one of my videos. In today's video, we will be creating some fun and simple Christmas cards which can be easily created at the last minute and even mass produced. I decided to divide this video in two parts. For today's video, I have some easy background embossing and snowflake die cutting. I'm keeping it simple here. You can create a bunch of cards using different colored cardstocks. Well, for the second part of our video, which I will be sharing later this week, I have lots of sparkly embossing and again a super easy Christmas card which can be easily mass produced. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my videos. Let's get started with the cardstocks that I will be using to create our Christmas cards. I have 3 shades of cardstocks in the shade of green, red and purple. I cut out multiple panels since I plan to mass produce all of these cards. For today's card, I will be gold heat embossing the Merry Christmas sentiment from the Simon Says stamp Santa's Helpers stamp set. This is a beautiful 6x8 stamp set that has these cute little elves, a string of Christmas ornaments and a little bird and a snowman. It also comes with some snowflake images and a bunch of sentiments. Next, we have this embossing folder called Pinpoint Starlets by Simon Says Stamp that I will be using to create my embossed background. This folder was part of my Simon Says Stamp August card kit. I love how I'm able to mix and match the products from different card kits to create something unique and fun. I also have this little snowflake die. It's a very beautiful and intricate die which I will be using to create my focal point. These are all the products that I will be using to create the front panel of my card. The links to all these products, including the embossing powder that I will be using to stamp my sentiment, will be linked in the description box below. Let's get started with embossing our background panel. I cut out these sheets of cardstock a 1/4 inch smaller than an A2 size base panel. These panels measures 4 by 5 1/4. I run the panel along with the embossing folder through my Cuttlebug die cutting machine. I love how pretty this embossed background looks. You could just keep it simple and add a little sentiment label before assembling your card. But I decided to add some sparkle to our cards, so I went with this gold cardstock to cut out my snowflake. A fun detail about this particular snowflake die is that it gives me 2 cutouts at the same time, so I was able to layer the snowflakes over each other. Here are the 2 snowflakes which can be easily layered over each other. or you can use them individually if you prefer. To adhere my snowflakes onto this embossed background, I will be using this Craft Bond spray adhesive. I wanted the snowflakes to pop a little and not lie flat on the background panel. For that, all I did was very lightly sprayed the backs of both my snowflakes, concentrating more towards the center. If you want a flat look, go ahead and add the spray adhesive onto the entire die cut piece. You could also use some liquid glue to adhere the die cut piece onto the panel. Since this was a very intricate die cut piece, I went with the spray adhesive instead of the liquid glue. The spray adhesive gives me an even coverage of the adhesive on my die cut, and I am not worried about any glue oozing out from the sides. Once I have my die cut piece on the center of my embossed background, I can now go ahead and stick my sentiment strip. This is a Merry Christmas sentiment that I took from the Simon Says stamp Santa's Helpers stamp set and gold heat embossed it on white cardstock. I added a golden border to this sentiment strip using my gold watercolor. This is the same technique I used to add border in my previous card. Also, since I plan to create multiple cards for this Christmas season, I went ahead and heat embossed multiple of these sentiment strips. I have a video showing tips and tricks to create multiple sentiment strips. I will provide a link to that video in the description box below. I used a thin strip of foam tape to adhere the sentiment strip onto the center of my snowflake. Now that my background panel is completely ready, we can go ahead and adhere this onto a pre-folded cardstock using a strong double-sided tape. Here's a look at the finished card. I was able to create similar design cards in the 3 different colored cardstock and was able to create over 20 similar cards in under 45 minutes. Here's a look at the finished cards. I love how with minimum supplies, I was able to create so many beautiful cards in a very short period of time. Here are some pictures of the cards that I created today. Hope you had fun watching the video and got inspired to create your own holiday theme backgrounds and make a bunch of cards at once. Don't forget to check out the part 2 of this last minute mass producing Christmas card series. Thanks again for joining me today. I would love for you to become a subscriber to my channel, and if you do subscribe, make sure to hit the bell icon so that you don't miss the next time I post a video. Here are a couple of other videos that you might be interested in watching. Thank you so much and have a great day. Hello everyone and welcome back to another one of my videos. Today, we will be creating 2 fun cards using 1 sheet of the Made by Elves 3D decoupage by Craft Consortium, which was part of the Simon Says stamp December card kit. Each sheet comes in 5 layers that you can stack over one another to create a 3-dimensional scene for your card. But today I will be using these layers to create 2 cards with a very little dimension. I will be using these images to create my focal point for the cards. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my videos. Let's take a look at the products I will be using in today's video, both of which are from the Simon Says stamp December card kit. I will be using this beautiful 6x8 Santa's Helpers stamp set and this 3D sheet with all these beautiful little elves on it. Each layer of these die cut images can be easily popped out. This actually saves so much of my time. I didn't have to stamp, color and then die cut. These are so perfectly cut to fit over each other that can be easily stacked over each other to give a three-dimensional look. Out of the 5, I will be using 4 of these cutouts to layer on my card front. I'm using small foam squares to stack the die cuts over each other. If you look closely, you will see that the dimensional look I get with these images. Since I stacked only 2 of the layers over each other, I'm not going to get a very thick image, so these can be easily mailed out without any extra postage. Here's a look at both the images. These will be the focal points for my card. I'm using Nina White cardstock as both my background panel and my card base. Before we stack these die cut images onto a card panel, let's first stamp the sentiments. I'm using the sentiments from Santa's Helper stamp set. I will stamp these images in 2 different colors of embossing powder. Before we do the embossing, don't forget to use the anti-static powder tool on your card panel. I stamped the sentiments using Versamark ink. For the first half of the sentiment, I used black embossing powder. You will see that I used a flat brush to remove any excess embossing powder around the sentiments. I did the same for both my card fronts. Then I heat embossed the panels before stamping the second sentiment. For my second sentiment, I stamped the word Christmas and gold heat embossed it. Now that our focal point is ready and we have a stamped background, it's time to assemble our card. But before that, I need to add some pop of color on our card. I will be using my distress ink in the shade Broken China and blending some ink onto the center of the card panel where I plan to stick the die cut piece. I use some liquid glue to stick the 3D die cut piece onto my panel. At this stage, you can call the card done. But since this is a Christmas card, I wanted some more shine and sparkle on it. So I decided to add a gold border around the panel. For this, I'm using my metallic watercolor palette. I will be using the gold watercolor to paint the edges of the panel. For this, all I did was dipped the wet paintbrush into gold color and very lightly dragged my brush on the edges of the panel. I'm not worried about getting a straight line border. I want a more distressed yet elegant look to my card. You could also add a gold card panel behind the main focal panel to create the border or use washi tapes. There are so many ways you could do it. Choose a method that you prefer. Here's the finished look. I love how sparkly the border looks. Here's a comparison between the panel with the watercolored border and the one without. It's your choice to add the sparkle or leave the panel as is before you can assemble it onto a card base. Now, our front panel is ready to go onto a card base. I'm using foam tape to mount my panels onto a white top folding card base. Here's a look at the finished card. But wait, before we call the card done, we will add some more shine and sparkle to our card. Here I'm using my Spectrum Noir glitter brush pens to add shine and sparkle to my focal point. Now we can call these cards done. Here's a look at both the finished cards. I love how with minimum supplies I was able to create two beautiful cards. Don't forget that I still have the fifth layer of the 3D pattern paper which I can use for another project. I will leave a link down in the description box below for all the supplies that I have used in today's video. Here are some pictures of the cards that I created today. Hope you had fun watching the video and got inspired to create your own holiday theme backgrounds using any of the pattern papers that you might have. Tag me on my Instagram at rp_shutterbug with fun pictures of your projects. I will leave a link to that in the description box down below. Thanks again for joining me today. I would love for you to become a subscriber to my channel, and if you do subscribe, make sure to hit the bell icon so that you don't miss the next time I post. Here are a couple of other videos that you might be interested in watching. Thanks so much and have a great day. Hello everyone and welcome back to another one of my videos. I hope you guys had an amazing 2021. Now let's take a look at the last card for this year. In today's video, we will be creating two fun, interactive and simple holiday cards. I have this beautiful Christmas tree focal point with lots of shine and sparkle. I know. Christmas was a few days back, but something about the snowy weather and my tree still being out there in my living room makes me want to celebrate this holiday season until the very end. It is still so wonderful to have the lights and calm of Christmas. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my videos. The first card that I have here is an interactive card, some die cutting and a little peekaboo Christmas and New Year greeting. For this, you will need an A2 size top folding cardstock and a card panel measuring 4 by 5 1/4 and this cute Christmas tree die set from Lawn Fawn. It's called the Jolly Christmas Tree. Let's begin by die cutting the cardstocks as a start point to create our main focal point. For this, I will be sticking the card panel onto my folded cardstock just like as I would do at the time of assembling my card. I adhere the card panel using a temporary purple tape and took the shadow Christmas die and aligned it onto the center of my card. I run this assembly through my die cutting machine and you will see that it cuts through both the card panels and my pre-folded cardstock. Make sure to open the pre-folded cardstock before you run it through the die cutting machine. I'm using the same purple tape to hold the die in place. Depending on the thickness of the cardstocks, you might want to run the panels a couple of times through your machine. I'm using an 80-pound cardstock here, which made it easier for me to get both the panels cut out in a single run. Here I have the two die cut panels and the cutouts, all of which we will be using to create our card today. You could skip the smaller panel and just use the pre-folded cardstock with the tree die cut. But I chose to add some textured backdrop onto our card. For that, I will be embossing some snowflakes onto the card panel before I adhere it onto my pre-folded cardstock. Now for the inside of our card, where we will have our focal point. I will now be using the die cut pieces of the tree to create my flapped focal point. This focal point will appear through the shadow window. I created a score line onto the top of one of the trees, which will help in opening up this panel to reveal our message inside on the base of the flap panel. Once I have all the pieces that are required to create my card, let us now work on our focal point. I will be cutting out this intricate tree using some green cardstock and then the same thing using a golden, yellow and red cardstock to add some kind of embellishments onto my tree. I cut out a shadow Christmas tree from a dark green colored cardstock and placed the intricate light green onto it using some spray adhesive. Part by part, I went on to assemble our tree with the golden and the red embellishments more like Christmas ornaments, and I also added a golden star on top of our tree. Our tree is now ready, but before I assemble it onto the card base, I will first go ahead and heat emboss our Christmas sentiment onto the inner part of the tree flap. I used a gold embossing powder to add an element of shine on my card. I then added some liquid adhesive onto the star and placed both the tree panels over each other to complete my flap. Now we can place this flap on the inside of the card, aligning it to the die cut opening window of the front panel. Once I had my focal point in place, I went ahead and adhered my embossed panel onto the front of the card base using a strong double-sided adhesive. To finish the card, I gold heat embossed the sentiment onto a black cardstock and added it onto the front of my card. I used my Spectrum Noir glitter brush pens to add sparkle on my trees, and we can call this card done. Here's a closer look at this cute interactive peekaboo card design. I love how it turned out. Here are a couple of close-up pictures of the card and the beautiful intricate design. Moving on to the second card, here I will be using the golden Christmas tree die cut from the previous card that we created. This golden die cut will be the focal point of our card. But before we attach the die cut, let's get into some ink blending. For this, I will be creating a mask using the shadow tree die. I will be aligning the mask right onto the center of my card panel. I am using distress inks in various shades of green to color my tree. Once I'm done ink blending, I will carefully remove the mask and look at how beautiful this blending has turned out. I will now use some spray adhesive to attach the golden die cut onto the blended Christmas tree. This die cut will kind of give me a border to my Christmas tree. I decided to add some snowflakes to the scene, but instead of the regular white snowflakes, I decided to add some gold and copper splatters. I'm using my metallic watercolor palette to add the splatters to my background. But first, I will go ahead and use the same tree cut die to cover my ink blended focal point. For this card, instead of adding the colorful embellishments, I decided to go ahead and use my gold Spectrum Noir glitter brush pen to add sparkle on the star and the little ornaments on my tree. I used the same gold heat embossed Season's Greeting sentiment strip and fixed it on the base of my tree. Now that our card panel is ready, with this beautiful background and the focal point, it's time to assemble it onto a pre-folded card base. I added some foam tape at the back of the panel to give it some extra dimension. I also added some additional sparkle and shine using my glossy accent and copper pearls. Here's a look at the finished card. I love how these two cards turned out. I hope you too had fun watching this video. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Tag me on my Instagram with fun pictures of your projects and also mention your thoughts and ideas in the description box below. I would love for you to become a subscriber to my channel, and if you do subscribe, make sure to hit the bell icon so that you don't miss the next time I post a video. Here are a couple of other videos that you might be interested in watching. Thanks so much and see you in my next video. Until next time, stay safe and wishing you all a very happy new year.